This is the brand being Exchange, and we're going to start exchanging now with an amazing group of people. Amy Weisenbach is currently the VP of Brand Marketing for the New York Times. David Echegoyen, is currently the Chief Customer Officer at Jet.com, where he oversees all marketing functions. Dustee Jenkins is currently the Head of Communications at Spotify. And then finally, Mikio Fujitsuka, he spent the last 14 years at J&J, working on all the brands you've heard of. All right, so Amy, the New York Times has reported that 2/3 of its revenue comes from paid subscriptions. I thought people didn't pay for news anymore. The bulk of those are digital only. And that number is growing 20-25% year over year. It sounds somewhat counterintuitive. So what do you think is responsible for people's willingness to pay for media?
Well, I think it's, you could call it a perfect storm, you could call it a convergence, but I think it's a number of things. The last Mary Meeker report talked about how subscriptions in general are growing, and you showed it right there of these businesses. So I think particularly younger consumers are more used to paying for subscriptions and subscribing to things that they care for versus buying. And so I think that trend is working in our favor. The news, it's no secret that the news is in the news. People feel like journalism, and particularly independent journalism, is under threat. And so a lot of subscribers tell us that they've decided to start paying. Maybe they've been reading us for a long time, but finally understand that it's important to pay for news, and sort of almost as like an act of democracy or an act of supporting the Fourth Estate. And I think the other thing is counter to what you said, but we actually have really started to invest in our brand. When we were a newspaper, it was kind of easy to know a lot of things about the brand because it was all contained right inside the product. The name was on it. It had a price, which conveyed value. There were sections that told you about our breadth. Today, most people encounter one article, so we have a lot of work to do to help them understand what our brand's about, and chances are the article that you've encountered is probably about Trump, and so a lot of people think that that's all we write about, and so it's important for us to help people understand what our brand values are, what we're really about, and really what the breadth, we produce over 200 articles every day, and only a small portion of them are about politics.
So brand values is an interesting place to pick up. Dustee, we've talked a lot about Spotify and how Spotify can sometimes be, depending on the seat you're sitting in, a savior or a villain. And that your role is oftentimes about communicating the importance of the brand values and the brand mission. You want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So just to take a small step back, I'm sure many of you have heard of Spotify, but you might not know the story of Spotify. And so Daniel Ek, the founder, we are a founder-led company, about 10 years ago, was someone who had a passion for music and technology. So he pursued both as a child, but actually found he was probably better on the tech side. And so a friend came to him years after, when he was in the tech industry, and said, "I'm an artist, but I can't make a living off my work because of piracy." And so we all saw that side of this world, and many of you saw what it was like to download songs, and it was a long process. It wasn't necessarily a good process. And then at the same time, the artists were being hurt by this. And Daniel looked at it and said, there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way for these artists, but there also has to be a better way for consumers, because this is a crummy experience. And so I thought the upfront was really helpful, because Spotify was born out of a need that there had to be a better way. And so Daniel believed that you should have all of the world's music in your pocket, and that people would actually pay for it. So our goal is that we want 1 million creators to be able to live off of their work. And we want more than 1 billion people to be able to enjoy it every single day. And for Daniel, that's about making it easier to get access to music, making it easier for artists to find success, helping you find an artist that you've never heard of and discover a talent that you've never heard of. And so we're constantly looking for ways to do that. And that makes my job kind of easy, because it's, how do I tell that story? How do I make sure that we're getting credit for that? Of course, there are a number of factors at play, and so this notion of are we a savior or are we hurting the industry comes in. But we believe if we just keep living that mission every single day, that story will tell itself. And I'm here to help with that piece as well.
So that's great. And you touched on discovery. And discovery is a theme that comes up a lot when we talk about these brands. David, excuse me. Etch,
Yes.
you were quoted recently saying that we, meaning the collective we, the royal we, as Americans, consumers, global citizens, have lost our ability to be curious. What do you mean by that?
I think the context of the conversation was diversity on that quote, but I think it applies to a lot of things. And it was diversity because curiosity finds indifference, as in when something is different, curiosity finds that as fuel. And it's like, oh, that's different. I'm going to explore that. I'm going to try to understand that. And what's happened with the polarization that we've had in the country is something being different is now the opposite. It's like you're now different and I will reject different instead of I will invest in different. So we could use it as fuel. And I think it applies to a lot of things. It's like we've become amazing at creating convenience for customers that a lot of times cuts off entire parts that are critical to development, social, et cetera. And so a lot of it was if we keep on being curious and allow for our differences to fuel that curiosity, I think we're better off in general in society, not just as marketers or customers.
It's really interesting. One of the things I heard recently that really sort of jumped off the page was that if you want to get Silicon Valley investment in your startup, you should be replacing something that everybody's mother used to do for them when they were in high school, like grocery delivery or things like that. That's a surefire way to get investment. So Mikio, you've been at J&J for 14 years now. You've worked on a very wide range of brands. A lot of them, though, are household names. They're established. They've been around for a long time. And you've managed to find interesting ways of sort of either making them relevant again or helping them maintain that relevance. One that really stood out to me was the licensing deal you struck for Band-Aid with J. Crew, right? So sort of a staid old brand, brand in Band-Aid with a cool hip brand in J. Crew. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how you're able to sort of reinvent that brand relevance?
Yeah. So Band-Aid is a great Americana brand, obviously. It's been around for almost 100 years. And it's the trademark, by the way. It's not non-trademark word. It's a trademark. And 4 billion bandages being used every year in the United States. 4 billion. It's a lot, right? 1 billion of which is between the kids and parents. Those are the moments, right? Connection moments when parents can feel like I'm actually protecting my little child. The child cries, put the Band-Aid on, she turn crying to a smile and go on her day or his day. And I think that connection moment was super important, fundamental for Band-Aid brand. But obviously, just like many other large brands, we're continued losing relevance. And one of the insights that led to J. Crew partnership is that when you look at the decorative bandages or the character bandages in Band-Aid, we've noticed that there are some licensed characters, namely Mickey Mouse and Hello Kitty, are actually bought more by adults than kids. Right? We made it historically for kids, but I think we were wrong. I think consumers are actually much smarter than the marketers, and that's why we had a brutal realization that, we're missing the whole point of why we have deco bandage opportunity. So we actually started with the Sincere Curly followed by Isaac Mizrahi, but those opportunities are somewhat limited. We wanted to go much more relevant, different distributions. Obviously, some of the mass brands have a very traditional relationship with the retailers like Walmart, Target, CVS, you name it, right? We wanted to go to some of the channels that the consumers are going, and we wanted to show up in a very relevant way. And J. Crew was based on one of our research. That was the right consumers for us to talk to. So we were able to strike the licensing deal with the J. Crew founders and designers directly involved writing our bandages or designing bandages, and exclusively available in J.Crew as a Band-Aid brand. So we didn't sell it to Target, we didn't sell it to Walmart, we just made it only available for J.Crew. And the really purpose of going back to brand being, it's really important for any person who's managing brand to really think about if the brand is a human, what lunch table you want to sit together with in that lunchtime. And we thought that, Band-Aid has a different place that you can sit because it's a brand for generations. But there's this one table that is people who are fashion-centered adults who are willing to buy the decorated bandages. We never sat on that table. So we struck the opportunities, and the rest is history.
So, Amy, let's pick up on that lunch tables concept, because you've worked in sporting goods, you've worked in booze, you've worked in fashion, you've worked in a lot of different brands. You have probably a pretty interesting perspective on how brands are identifying and reaching their audiences today. So do you want to pick up on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think a ton has changed when I think back to when I was the associate brand manager on this new little brand that Unilever had just launched called Axe Body Spray. I remember being very mad that that's what I got assigned to. They told me it was going to be huge. And I thought, a body spray for men, really? Luckily, I was wrong. But we were one of the very first advertisers on Facebook back when they were called Facebook flyers. One thing I think has held really true over that time, and that's, I think, that brands that are really clear about who they are and why they exist and what their purpose is tend to find amazing ways to connect with their consumers around those values. And I think that was true back when I worked on Axe, and as silly as it was, I think we, in a category that was really surprising to try to do that, I think we did that pretty well. And certainly at a brand like the New York Times, and really I think all the brands I've tried to work on over the course of my career have had that in common for the most part. And while the medium has changed, it used to be most of your money in traditional linear TV. That word linear TV, I don't even know if that word existed then. It was just TV. And the places have changed, but I think the places where we can tell stories, where we can connect emotionally, where we can share values with our consumers are the places that continue. They may be called different things, they may show up in different places, but those continue to be the places that really matter for the best brands. So
it's really just comes down to understanding and connecting with the customer. So, that, I guess, leads into you're the chief customer officer at Jet. You run marketing, but you're the chief customer officer, which sort of implies elevated emphasis on understanding and reaching the customer, right? Is that how you think about marketing?
Yeah, if you're all up for a ride at 2 minutes anthropological on how we ended up with the chief customer officer, when you were going through your slides and me looking at all these brands that have been successful at their time, all you need to get to that point where you become irrelevant is one thing: success. If they were not successful, we would never even talk about them. But when you become successful, what you do is you try to proliferate it. And the way to proliferate it is just to scale it. And to scale it, you have to keep on doing the thing that you were doing that got you the success you wanted. And so you just keep on growing this massive thing. And when that happens, you have resources. And when you have resources, you just want to go create expertise in all these different areas because you have money. And money gives you expertise. In today's world, you can get money without having success. You can get VC money or PE money, or you name the syllable money, and that allows you to say, now I can go have experts in everything: marketing, product, communications, delivery, R&D. And so what had happened is, I think in the process of having such amazing experts, you build organizations that are designed to deliver KPIs for functions versus truly deliver the customer. And that's so easy to get there because you generate successful companies doing it until you're at a scale where it's easy for you to become irrelevant. And so when I came to Jet, Liza, who was the president of the Jet at the time, she was my boss, had been the chief customer officer. And when we talked about creating the role again, my push was we created all this functional expertise And I remember it's like the product team, which controls most of what's on the website, was excited about redesigning the cart. Meanwhile, marketing was excited about launching groceries. Meanwhile, the dev team was excited about the cleanest, best, most amazing code ever. And there was really not a conversation, unless it was in small pockets, about what the customer wanted. And so we said, in order for us to continue to succeed, we actually have to bring all of these efforts back to one agenda, to one set of priorities. And instead of having functional experts say, for us to become the best product organization, we have to do this, we should say, here's the things we're going to achieve for us to become the best customer organization. Because at the end of the day, they leave, we don't have a business. And so, and Miguel Fernandez, who's sitting right there, he's the head of design and product and UX UI at Jet, can keep me honest on whatever I'm saying that's not really true in the company. But it was very needed. It was very needed, and I saw my job as trying to bring people who could help infuse the thinking and needs of the customer, and then build an organization of multiple functions that allowed for us to have customer centricity.
So a lot of that revolves around the people, the internal people that you're aligning around that. And Dustee, that's another thing that you've talked about with Spotify, is how your first stakeholder is typically internal as opposed to external.
Yes, for sure. So Spotify is in 65 markets around the world. And as a result, keeping the team connected and ensuring one really consistent experience around the world relies heavily on communicating to employees. And so, again, founder-led company, a lot of it starts and stops with the founder. And so he believes firmly in this notion of radical transparency. And so employees have access to lots of data in terms of how's the company doing on any given day. And as a newly publicly traded company, obviously this is something that we have to be very mindful of with employees and making sure they understand what they can and what they can't share. Our CEO has every 2 weeks a Q&A with employees. Many tech companies do that, but it's really anything goes. And he gets asked anything and everything. And so that notion of radical transparency and an accountability that allows us to talk about what works and doesn't work sort of keeps the company thriving, moving ahead. Because at the end of the day, in the tech industry, it's all about speed and first mover advantage. And if we all don't know where we're going to fall behind. And so communicating to employees is not as much about sharing information. Absolutely, that's critical, but it's about making sure we're all on the same page, so we're all moving in the right direction.
We should talk.
I'd love that.
We were acquired by a public company, and we had a POV of radical transparency that very quickly was tempered with being public and understanding that the fact that we shared everything with employees could create tremendous issues in public markets. So we really should talk.
I would love that, yes.
Let's give a big round of applause to our panelists.